How I got everything I ever wanted in one moment. How I let go of my woman. But how did I do it? You will be very surprised. But let's start from the beginning. I got a message saying my wife, Olivia, had made a reservation at a restaurant for Valentine's Day. That threw me off since I was usually the one who planned these things every year. But by the time evening rolled around, all I got was another message. She had to work late. Not long after, I came across a WhatsApp post from her colleague, Ryan. It read, "Only a caring sister knows how to spoil someone. A fancy restaurant, a sweet person. Tonight's cake was sweet, but not as sweet as your lips." The photo attached showed him and Olivia, way too close for just colleagues. Around her neck was the necklace I had gifted her that morning, and on the table sat the bottle of wine I had picked out just for her. I recognized the place immediately. It was the same restaurant where Olivia and I had shared so many important moments. Our anniversaries, our late-night talks, and even the night I got down on one knee and proposed. Years ago, I probably would have confronted her on the spot. But this time, I just felt drained. When Olivia finally got home, I was sitting at the table, eating a mango, something I hadn't done in years because of her allergy. We had always kept mangoes out of the house for her sake. She looked surprised to see me still up, then casually handed me a box with a brand new Patek Philippe watch inside. "Happy Valentine's Day, honey." She had always been a good wife. After all, not just taking, but giving too. But that night, something else threw me off. The restaurant owner, a guy who'd known us since our college days, sent me a message. He joked about being single again this year, then congratulated us as he always did. He also mentioned a new cake they were offering and asked if I wanted to try it. I asked if it had mango. He said no, so I agreed. Then, right after, Olivia called. She gave me the same excuse, overtime, said she wouldn't be able to make it tonight. Later that night, unable to sleep, I scrolled through my phone and came across Ryan's post. The same one. The picture of them at our restaurant, with my wine and my necklace. But this time, I noticed something else. The cake on the table had layers of mango puree. Olivia, the woman who would break out in hives just being near mango, had somehow sat through a meal where it was right in front of her. That told me everything I needed to know. I was too tired to fight. I didn't even mention the post. Instead, I had a sudden craving for mango, the very thing I had denied myself for years because of her. So I ordered some, and I ate it. When I was done, I leaned back and said, "I'm heading to bed now, unless there's something else." Olivia seemed confused. She reached for my arm and said, "Daniel, it's Valentine's Day." I stared at her. "So what?" She frowned, then stepped closer, lowering her voice into a teasing whisper. "On a night like this, are you really going to sleep so early?" Olivia had always carried herself with a certain coolness, an air of quiet detachment. After we graduated, her glasses only added to that intellectual charm, like she was above it all. But tonight, I caught the faint scent of cigarette smoke on her. I took a step back, dodging her kiss. "I just ate mango," I said flatly. "You'll have an allergic reaction." Then I walked to the bedroom, locked the door, and lay down. My phone buzzed. It was my supervisor. "So, you finally decided to take the job?" she asked. "Listen, if you flake on me again because of Olivia, I swear, I'll kill you." I let out a dry chuckle. "Don't worry, I won't back out this time. And if I do, I'll bring my head to you on a platter." The position in the advertising department had been on the table for years. Better pay, more opportunities, but constant travel. I had turned it down before because of Olivia. She wasn't the type to handle being alone. She liked stability, routine. It had taken me over 6 months just to get her to hold my hand. Back in school, my friends always said Olivia was boring. They never got why I liked her so much. I'd just smile and tell them, because she saved my life. Literally. It was in middle school. An earthquake hit, and in the rush to get out of the building, I tripped over a desk leg and hit the ground. The crowd was panicked, pushing forward. But Olivia? She fought against the chaos, pushing toward me. She made sure I got out safely, keeping herself in front of me the whole way. Later, I asked her, "What were you thinking? If you died, wouldn't all your hard work, all your dreams, have been for nothing?" She looked startled, like she hadn't thought of it that way before. Then she just said, I wasn't thinking that much. In that moment, I just thought, if I couldn't make it out, I'd rather die with you. That was Olivia, always putting others first. But now, I wondered, had she ever imagined a day would come when she'd leave me for someone else? I never doubted her sincerity. But sincerity fades over time. Maybe my supervisor picked up on something in my voice, because she sighed and said, everybody screws up, Daniel. It's easy to blame the past, but fixing things? That's the hard part. I just hope you have the guts to turn things around when you need to. Then, with a smirk, she added, of course, someone as flawless as me never makes mistakes. But you? Yeah, you're not perfect. So don't screw this up. No matter what happens, don't lose the job over a woman. You start in 3 days, and your first stop is Argentina. No room for second thoughts. The next morning, I got up early and headed to the office. Needed to wrap things up before I left. Olivia was sitting in the living room, lips swollen, probably from an allergic reaction, probably from him. I walked past her, heading for the door, but she reached out and grabbed my wrist. She looked defensive. Why are you mad? She asked. Because I didn't spend Valentine's Day with you? I told you. I had to work overtime. The company is going public. Do you have any idea how hard it's been for me, as a woman, to make it into management? Everyone's watching me. I have to set an example. You always said you'd support my career, so why are you acting like this? I had put up with her distant, cold nature for years. Even when she was too busy to know I had been in the hospital, even when I couldn't reach her for days, I stayed quiet. Until one day, I picked her up from work. She was sitting in the passenger seat, touching up her lipstick when her phone rang. She answered immediately, her voice turning soft, warm, sweet. That was the first time I heard her say his name. Ryan. That was the moment I realized. She wasn't too busy for phone calls. She just didn't think I was worth the effort. I pulled my arm away, my voice low but firm. Enough, Olivia. We're done. She opened her mouth to argue, but before she could say a word, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, then at me, an apologetic look flashing across her face before she answered. It was Ryan. Sis, come pick me up. It's freezing today. I don't want to get out of bed. If I don't show up, I won't get paid. Olivia's expression softened instantly. Her voice, once indifferent, turned warm. You? Afraid of the cold? The same guy who climbs snowy mountains at night? She chuckled. All right. Get up. You're bringing me breakfast, right? I let out a bitter laugh. Ryan, sensing something was off, added with a smirk, oh, and tell Daniel thanks for me. Not only did I eat at his restaurant yesterday, but I also borrowed one of his people. I'll send him a great gift soon. Olivia tensed. I saw the guilt flicker across her face before she quickly turned away and lowered the volume on her phone, as if that would change anything. I shook my head, let out a breath, and turned to leave. But Olivia wasn't done. She hung up and rushed after me. Ryan had a client dinner and forgot to make a reservation. I let him use ours. It was just for business. You understand, right? I stared at her. She really believed that excuse would work. Later that night, I wasn't feeling well. I asked her to make me some porridge. She barely glanced at me as she slipped on her coat. Ryan has no food at home. I'm going over to cook for him. I froze. I wasn't even sure what to ask first, why she was going or what their relationship actually was. But before I could get a word out, she was already at the door, too distracted to notice me curled up on the couch, sick. It was such a contrast to how things used to be. Back in school, if I looked even the slightest bit off, if I seemed tired, skipped a meal, Olivia would scold me coldly. But when break time came, she'd silently pull out a bowl of steaming rice cakes, pushing it toward me with a sharp eat. You'll feel worse if I don't take care of you. But now, I didn't even warrant a second glance. At work, my supervisor dropped a thick stack of paperwork onto my desk. Finish this in 3 days, or bring me your head. Late that night, I checked my phone. There it was. A draft of the divorce papers from my lawyer. I didn't hesitate. I stepped out into the snowstorm and hailed a cab straight to Olivia's office. But as I arrived, the building suddenly went dark. The power had gone out. I turned on my phone's flashlight, and right then, a message popped up from a colleague. Hey, isn't this that concert you always wanted to go to? Confused, I clicked the link. It was a post from Ryan, a photo collection, him and Olivia over the years. High school, college, work. His bio read, being head over heels for her isn't just your privilege. My fingers clenched around my phone. Then, I saw the video. Concert lights flashing wildly. A packed crowd. And right in the middle, Olivia and Ryan. Holding hands. Kissing. The phone slipped from my grasp and hit the floor with a dull thud. Olivia and I had spent most of our lives together. Yet, in that moment I realized I didn't know her at all. From inside her office, I heard muffled sobs. I'm sorry, Olivia whispered, her voice shaking, but we can't. A male voice, soft and desperate. I just like you. What did I do wrong? Through the glass, I could see them. Ryan had his arms wrapped around her, stroking her tear-streaked face. Then he kissed her cheek, his hands sliding from her waist up to cradle the back of her head. And in the darkness, they kissed. Long lingering. Slow. Then bang. The power flickered back on, and the entire room was bathed in light. They turned and saw me. Ryan stumbled back, hands raised like a guilty man caught red-handed. Daniel, it's not what it looks like, he stammered. I swear. I just love her too much. It's not her fault. Olivia, dazed, turned to me, her lips still wet. Daniel, why are you here? I didn't answer. I just smiled. Then I walked up and drove my fist straight into Ryan's face. The force sent him reeling, but I grabbed his collar before he could hit the ground, yanking him close. That one's for your pathetic face, I muttered. I've met plenty of pretentious women, but you're the first man I've met who acts like one. Makes me sick. Before he could respond, I slammed a right hook into his stomach. He doubled over, gasping. Olivia snapped out of her daze, her eyes wide, just about to speak. But I was already pulling off my wedding ring. I tossed it at her like garbage. It hit her chest and clattered to the ground. And just like that, she broke. Tears streamed down her face as she sobbed, gripping the ring. Daniel, don't do this. Please, just listen to me. I didn't listen. I shoved the divorce papers into her hands. Olivia, we're getting a divorce. I turned and left. She ran after me, stumbling down the stairs. Daniel, please, just hear me out. It's not what you think. Half the building was watching. Embarrassed, I flagged down a cab. But before I could shut the door, Olivia pressed against it, her hands gripping the frame. Her face was desperate, pleading. There's nothing between us, she swore. He's just a kid. He doesn't know any better. I sneered. Oh, so you were just teaching him how to kiss in advance? Her face crumbled. For the first time, Olivia looked completely lost, like she was staring at a ship that had already sailed. Don't look at me like that, Daniel, she whispered, her voice trembling. Please, don't look at me like that. Then, barely above a whisper, we've been together for 10 years. I can't live without you. Ryan was just an accident. Before I could respond, a voice called out from behind her. Olivia, Ryan's gone up to the rooftop. Hurry. I let out a dry, humorless laugh and slammed the car door shut without hesitation. In the rearview mirror, I saw Olivia take a few steps forward, as if she might chase after me. But then she stopped. She turned and ran back into the building. I closed my eyes. The moment the anger faded, the sharp, hollow ache in my chest took its place. The driver glanced at me through the mirror, his voice filled with concern. Hey, kid, you okay? I wiped my face, turned my head toward the window, and stayed silent. Back home, I started packing my things. Not long after, both Olivia's parents and mine called me, one after the other. I shook my head bitterly. She sure is busy, calming Ryan down from jumping off a building while still finding time to send in the peacemakers. Olivia and I had been together for over a decade. The ties between us weren't easy to sever. But in the end, my parents only said one thing. Son, we just want you to choose whatever will make you happy. When I finished packing, I opened the door to leave, only to find Olivia standing there. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. She looked like a child caught doing something wrong, trembling as she reached for my hand. "Daniel, please don't go. Let me explain." I just stared at her. Then, suddenly, she broke down. "I'm begging you," she sobbed. "Hit me, scream at me, do whatever you want. Just don't look at me like that. Please, don't look at me like that." She pressed down on my suitcase, her body trembling as she tried to stop me from leaving. "Daniel, we promised we'd grow old together. Our parents are waiting for us in Beijing for the new year. You can't leave me now. Mom and Dad miss you so much." I let out a long breath, watching her carefully. "What do you want, Olivia?" She nearly collapsed, wrapping her arms around my leg, soaking my pants with her tears. "Please," she whispered, "give me another chance. I promise I'll do better." I didn't answer right away. My gaze drifted down to an old college graduation photo that had slipped out of my suitcase. I picked it up, and that's when I saw it. It wasn't just Olivia and me in the picture. Ryan was there too, standing beneath a tree in the background, staring at Olivia. And Olivia, she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at him. So it had started that early, hadn't it? All those moments I thought had belonged to just the two of us. Ryan had been there all along. Olivia trembled as she averted her gaze, like a criminal awaiting sentencing. But to her surprise, my voice was calm. "All right." She looked up, eyes wide with hope. "Really, Daniel? You're willing to start over?" I nodded, pausing before I added, "But on one condition." Her breath hitched. "Anything. Just tell me. Remember that island trip we planned back in high school?" I asked. "All these years, we never went. I want us to take that trip, 5 days, just us." Olivia barely hesitated. She threw herself into my arms. "That's it? That's all you want?" I nodded, but deep down, I already knew. She wouldn't be able to go through with it. Looking back, I wasn't even surprised by her attraction to Ryan. Her whole life had been carefully structured, dictated by her family's expectations. From Beijing to the capital, from school to marriage, even having me as her childhood sweetheart. It was all part of a neatly arranged path, safe and predictable. But when life is too stable, too certain, people start craving the unknown. And Ryan? He was that unknown. He was reckless, free-spirited. The kind of guy who'd take her on midnight hikes up snow-covered mountains, keep her up all night at concerts, kiss her as the sun rose over the ocean. Even someone as reserved as Olivia could get swept away in a whirlwind like that. She clung to me more than ever in the days that followed, as if afraid I might change my mind. She threw herself into planning the trip, handling every little detail, eager to finally take the vacation we had talked about for so long. Meanwhile, I scrolled through social media, detached. Ryan was posting constantly, practically torturing himself with his feelings for Olivia. His cryptic messages, his longing stares captured in black and white photos. It was like watching someone crumble in real time. Then, one day, he finally snapped. "The person she loves is me." That's what he posted. I smirked and typed out my own response. "From now on, I'll be living on the islands with my wife. The past is behind us, gone like smoke. Today is a new beginning. I just want to hold her hand from now on." It didn't take long for Ryan to react. He messaged me directly, demanding a meeting. We met at a small cafe. He glared at me across the table, his jaw clenched. "After everything, you're really going to forgive her? You're really staying with her?" I only smiled. He gritted his teeth. "You're seriously moving to the islands? Why hasn't she told me anything?" Instead of answering, I casually pulled out a document and placed it in front of him. The visa my supervisor had expedited for me. Half joking, I said, "Olivia and I have been together for over 10 years. She begged for another chance, so I told her. If she could drop everything and leave with me, I'd forgive her. And guess what? She agreed." I smiled again, but this time, my eyes held no warmth. Ryan went rigid, staring at me, his hands trembling slightly. "That's impossible," he whispered. "I've done everything for her. She told me she loved me." His anger was obvious, but beneath it, I could hear the pain. I just watched him, my gaze cold. Ryan had taken Olivia from me on Valentine's Day. He had taunted me, made sure I caught them in the act. He wanted me to walk away, to give up. What he didn't understand was that my place in Olivia's heart ran deeper than he ever realized. His plan had backfired, and now he was the one left standing in the wreckage. Ryan lunged at me, rage twisting his face. But what could a small guy like him do? I easily blocked him, grabbed my coffee, and dumped it over his head. Before he could react, I slapped him hard enough to send him crashing to the floor. I crouched down, fisting his hair and forcing him to meet my gaze. Smiling, I taunted him. Pathetic. You actually think Olivia loves you, don't you? You really believe that? His face burned with frustration, his jaw tight with resentment. It almost made me sick to look at him. You didn't actually think she loves you, did you? I repeated, my voice colder this time. He didn't answer, but I could see it, the shift in his expression. The moment it clicked, I let go of him, standing up. If Olivia chooses to leave with me, I'll forgive her. If she doesn't, I never will. I walked away, leaving him there on the ground. At the airport, Olivia kept checking her phone, her lips pressed into a tight line. Her fingers trembled as she finally looked at me. Daniel, something's happened. Ryan's been in a car accident. It's serious. Can we postpone the trip? I stared at her, taking in the worry etched into her face. Then, calmly, I said, I know why you didn't come to that concert with me. She froze. Her lips twitched as if she wanted to smile, but she couldn't. That night, I continued, was Ryan's birthday. He invited you, and you couldn't turn him down. Olivia swallowed hard. I let out a bitter laugh. That was my favorite band, Olivia. You knew that. Since I was a teenager, I told you my dream was to see them live. On my birthday, you kept asking what I wanted, and when I said, enough money to see them in concert, you got mad. You asked why my wish didn't include taking you with me. I paused, my voice steady. My birthday wish at 18 was to see that concert with you. Olivia said nothing, but I went alone. I exhaled sharply. I didn't know my wife was in the crowd, kissing someone else. I even sent you a message that night to remind you to eat. You never replied. She started to panic, her voice rising as if scrambling for an excuse. There will be other chances? I cut her off. No, there won't. She blinked. That was their farewell concert. A silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Then, without warning, I waved her off. Go ahead, I said, voice lighter than it should have been. He's in an accident, right? You're his supervisor. It'd look bad if you didn't go. Olivia hesitated. I smiled, feeling the weight of the girl who, at 18, had pouted and begged me to take her to the islands. We'll just go next time. Something in her expression shifted. Relief, almost. She nodded, murmuring a rushed, thank you, before running out of the airport into the snow and rain. I watched her disappear. Then I tore up my plane ticket and tossed the pieces in the trash. I bought a new one. Destination, Argentina. Olivia woke up to soft kisses on her face. Something didn't feel right. Her eyes snapped open. The man beside her wasn't Daniel. Yesterday, she had rushed to the hospital, only to find out Ryan's car accident was a lie. She had been furious at first, but Ryan, teary-eyed, had pleaded, Olivia, I've loved you for so many years. Just one last time. Stay with me, just one more time. A voice inside her told her to leave. Daniel must be furious by now. She thought of how long they had been together. Since childhood, through college, 7 years of marriage. Everything had seemed so perfect. But then Ryan touched her cheek gently, his eyes rimmed with red, his lips trembling, and she stayed. Now, as she sat up in bed, a sinking feeling clawed at her chest. It was like a premonition, an instinctual dread. Like that moment in a dream when you realize you're about to fall and nothing can stop it. She suddenly remembered Daniel's face at the airport. The way he had smiled. It hadn't been a smile of reassurance. It had been a farewell. Panic surged through her. She nearly leaped out of bed, grabbing for her phone. Ryan sat up, confused. Olivia? What's wrong? She ignored him. She pressed the power button frantically. The screen was dead. Her heart pounded as she shoved the phone onto the charger, willing it to turn on faster. The moment the screen lit up, a call came through. It was her mother. The second she answered, sharp yelling filled her ears. It took her a moment to process what was happening. Daniel had gathered evidence of her affair with Ryan, and he had sent it, meticulously compiled into a PowerPoint presentation, complete with screenshots and attachments, to their family, friends, and colleagues. The final slide had his signature touch, a photoshopped wedding picture of her and Ryan, overlaid with a handwritten note. Let's wish this lovely couple a lifetime of childless, everlasting happiness. Olivia's hands shook as she hung up. She opened her messages. Unread, unread, unread. The world blurred around her. She bolted out of the apartment, speeding down the road recklessly, running red lights. The winter roads were treacherous, her car skidding more than once. But none of that mattered. She needed to get home. Daniel had always been forgiving, always patient. She clung to the hope that there was still a chance, that if she could just see him, if she could just talk to him, she could fix this. But when she finally arrived, the house was empty. Daniel was gone. Nearly everything had been packed up and taken away. Olivia stood there, staring at the stripped-down walls, her breath shallow. Her mind replayed their last conversations, the teasing remarks she had made while preparing for their trip. It's not like we'll be gone forever. Daniel had only smiled in response. And now, standing here, she realized, he had been planning to leave for some time, but she refused to accept it. They had been together nearly their entire lives. He couldn't live without her. He wouldn't. She just needed to apologize. To explain. He had forgiven her so many times before. He would forgive her again. But when she went to his office, his supervisor had her thrown out by security. When she tried reaching out to his colleagues, she was met with disdain. Days passed. Daniel was nowhere to be found. She eventually learned the truth. He had taken a new job, one that required constant travel, one that had no set return date. And then she noticed something else. Their old messages, once filled with teasing, with warmth, were cold now. The playful emojis were gone. The unanswered texts stretched back further than she had realized. And his social media? Not a single post mentioned her. Not a single trace of their life together remained. Daniel's last social media post was just a simple quote. When did you decide to break up? When you realized your future would feel like suffocation every single day. After finishing my business, I decided to take some time to explore Argentina. The country, thousands of miles from home, was basking in the middle of summer. The golden sun bathed everything in warmth. In Buenos Aires, tango dancers spun effortlessly in the streets, their movements filled with passion. The air was a mix of European elegance and Latin fire. A business partner invited me to Mendoza, where vineyards stretched endlessly under the summer sky, a sea of green leaves swaying with the breeze. As I sipped a glass of Malbec, my phone rang. Olivia. Her voice was hoarse. Daniel, where are you? I took another slow sip of wine before replying. On the other side of the world. What do you want? She hesitated. If you've signed the divorce papers, send them to my office. If not, don't bother calling. There was silence on the other end. Just as I was about to hang up, she suddenly choked out, I'm sorry. Then came the sobs, raw, helpless, like a lost child. Daniel, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Just tell me what to do, and I'll do it. 20 years. We've been together for over 20 years. Can you really just let it go? How can you be so heartless? I smiled to myself, and somehow, she heard it. Her crying stopped. Panicked, she asked, Daniel, why are you laughing? I exhaled, looking down at the deep red swirl of wine in my glass. You're always like this, Olivia. My voice was calm. So sure that I love you. So sure that if you show me your pain, I'll feel sorry for you. I leaned back in my chair, gazing at the endless rows of vineyards. But Olivia, have you ever thought that maybe I don't love you anymore? The next time I returned home, it was New Year's Eve. The problem with childhood sweethearts is that they know each other too well. As my family gathered around the reunion dinner, there was a knock at the door. I opened it. Olivia stood there. She looked different, disheveled, thinner than before. Her hair was a mess, her eyes hollow, her expression defeated. The PowerPoint presentation I had sent out had ruined both her and Ryan's reputations. Their friends, their colleagues, the people who once admired her, had turned their backs, disillusioned by the truth. At dinner, I overheard whispers about her fall from grace. I hadn't spoken to her since our last call. The streets outside were alive with warm lights, fireworks painting the night sky in bursts of red and gold. Olivia looked at me, eyes desperate, clinging to one last sliver of hope. Her voice faltered. Every year, we've always spent New Year's Eve together. Daniel, I love you. I really can't live without you. I stared at her. Suddenly, I remembered a younger version of her. The girl who had snuck out on a freezing New Year's Eve, cheeks flushed from the cold, just to give me a red string bracelet she had woven herself. I had thought seeing her now would hurt, but instead, I felt nothing. The past few months, traveling, seeing the world, meeting new people, had filled me in ways I never expected. Fireworks exploded in the sky, marking the end of the year. The long, cold winter was finally over. A new year had begun. I looked at Olivia and said, "Olivia, don't do this. It's New Year's." I let out a breath. "Seeing you like this, it makes me sick." Her face turned ashen. Without another word, I shut the door. When my parents asked who it was, I just shook my head. No one. And then, I turned back to the warmth of family dinner, laughing as I fought for the last piece of beef in the hot pot. It was perfect. I still had my family. Under the supposed brilliance of my supervisor's leadership, my career soared. I adapted quickly to the nomadic lifestyle, traveling from country to country. With every new place I visited, I sent my mom postcards. She had picked up internet slang recently and started calling me her travel frog, laughing about how I never stayed in one place for long. This time, I was in Japan. Munching on mango bread, I made my way toward a fireworks festival when my mom called, her voice laced with concern. "Son, be careful. I heard Japan has a lot of earthquakes." I smiled, reassuring her. "Mom, earthquakes aren't that common." But, as luck would have it, Japan's meteorological agency issued a rare, unprecedented earthquake warning for the Nankai Trough. Flights back home were fully booked. For a while, I was unreachable. My mom, frantic, started praying, even lighting incense at midnight for my safety. Meanwhile, Olivia, upon hearing the news, booked a flight to Japan. At the time, Ryan was still with her, though his life had crumbled. Blacklisted, jobless, he clung to her in their toxic mess of a relationship. He begged her not to go. "Don't be stupid. Even if you find him, Daniel won't forgive you. Don't you get it?" Olivia didn't listen. In their struggle, she grabbed a kettle and smashed it over his head. Blood poured down his face as he screamed, "He doesn't love you. Don't you get it? I'm the only one who loves you." Without a word, she walked away, leaving him behind. Despite flight delays, I eventually made it back home. Just before takeoff, my broken phone had received a call from an unknown number, but I had been urged to switch it off. By the time I landed, I had already forgotten about it. Life moved on. Until one day, Ryan showed up outside my office. He was no longer the confident man he once was. His eyes were red, his face unshaven, his entire body slumped in exhaustion. "Where's Olivia?" he demanded. "Give me back my Olivia." I stared at him through the glass door, watching the wreck of a man he had become. Then, something clicked. Olivia had arrived in Japan before the earthquake. I remembered that missed call. A strange feeling settled in my chest, but I kept my voice calm. "I don't care." I motioned to security. "She's your problem now." Later, the news finally came. Olivia's parents had reached out to my family. She had tracked me down in Japan, but when she called, all she got was a busy signal. She thought I was ignoring her. So she went looking for me. And when the earthquake hit, the building she was in collapsed. She was crushed under the debris, her legs shattered. Whether she would ever walk again was uncertain. My mother, hesitant, asked me, "Son, are you going to visit her?" I shook my head. No. Olivia and we had nothing to do with each other anymore. After hanging up, I looked out the window. A new country, a new adventure. What beauty awaited me here? I couldn't wait to see it. Because as far as the past was concerned, yesterday's story had already ended. And today's? It was just beginning. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. See you soon.